It's episode 9 of season 2 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Grapefruit League is well underway. This is the sore shoulder edition of the show, which makes me the perfect co-host since I don't know if you've heard, Griff, but I have an ailing shoulder, and I actually do. And it's not because I've thrown 200 innings in the last year. It's just because I've existed on this planet for a long time, and the body starts to break down. But it's good to see your face. How do you like my background? The Exit Philosophy background. Do you miss the kitchen cupboards? Do you miss the kitchen sink?
And the bowl of, or the pack of Cheerios that are always sitting behind you?
Hey, I always hide the Cheerios. You were noticing them?
For those watching on YouTube, it's a nice Exit Philosophy background with Griff and Scotty Mac. It makes me jealous. I want one too when I get older, when I grow up.
When I get older. Okay.
So what do we got today?
Wait another 20 years or so, and you'll be that age.
With a sore shoulder, which I didn't know about, you could be on the Blue Jays pitching staff. I bet you had a perfectly good shoulder all of 2023, and now you're finding out that it can happen. Like 1 year of good health doesn't mean that 2024 is going to be a complete year of good health, which the Blue Jays are finding out with their pitching staff, and we'll discuss that in a minute.
Yeah, and I'm not going to bore you with the details, Griff, because, I mean, hell, we're not here to talk about my shoulder, but I had the thing MRI'd back in June. You ever been in one of those MRI tubes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, fun in the way that it isn't fun at all, especially when you feel like the world is closing down on you. But here was the result: a partially torn labrum, tendonitis developing in my AC joint. No, excuse me, I got to get this right. Partially torn labrum, arthritis developing in my AC joint, and tendonitis in multiple rotator cuff tendons around the joints in my left shoulder. So a lot of fun. I asked my doctor, because I'm 44, I said, Doc, pretend I don't get this dealt with and I'm about 60. How's it going to feel? And he looked at me and he just started laughing. He said, you're going to need surgery. So
my guess,
that's where that's at.
My guess is that maybe a little bit of shoveling snow in Halifax had something to do with it. You should have stayed here.
Yeah, no, well, it had nothing. No, it was just, it's wear and tear. I popped something. I was lifting weights about 10 years ago now, and I popped something, and I remember going to George Poulis in the Blue Jays dugout the next day because it was sore. It wasn't like horrible, but it was sore. And I'm like, Georgie, this is what happened. I felt a bit of a tweak, or wouldn't call it a pop, but a little something. And he said to me at the time, he said, well, that's, and I explained the symptoms that I was experiencing. He goes, well, that kind of, it sounds like, it wasn't diagnosing me, but he said, it kind of sounds like an AC joint sprain. Well, 8 years later, and I've totally ignored the damn thing, and it's only gotten worse. So here we are.
That's part of the bonus of covering a major league team, is being able to access their training staff. I remember when I was doing PR with them, Steve Simmons fell down the stairs, and I took him in the training room, which is off limits, and they fixed him right up. He stayed. He's a gamer. He stayed and covered the game. But that's what normal human beings don't get, is Major League Baseball training facility.
Steve, though,
he fell down the stairs.
Steve's a brilliant enough guy, though. Like, he knows how to get the story. He might have fallen down the stairs so that he could become the first media person to get a good look at the Jays training facilities. See what's going on behind the scene. Who's getting what iced? Who's in the ice bath? Who's getting their shoulder worked on? All that stuff.
I was forced to blindfold him before we went in.
Yeah. Throw him in the back of the windowless white van and transport him off to somewhere in the middle of nowhere. By the way, if you enjoy the show, and we presume you do if you're here, first of all, we thank you for that. And assume that you're probably listening wherever you get your podcasts. Griff and I also have a YouTube page, youtube.com/exit philosophy. That's why when Griff makes fun of me, because I have the new exit philosophy background behind me, and my hair kind of looks like a Darth Vader helmet because I'm here and the logo is superimposed. If he's making fun of me for that, you can actually see it. youtube.com/exit philosophy. We post all of our podcast episodes there, and we also go live after select games during the regular season. So Griff and I haven't made any specific date announcements for that yet, but we'll sit down and cobble together a plan over the course of the year and try to be here for some live chats with you after select Blue Jays games. We're really looking forward to it.
So don't forget to like and subscribe if you are viewing us on the YouTube channel, and that will help our profile and help us out tremendously as the year goes on.
Right. And if we can get enough subscribers, and if we can get into the algorithm enough, we might, Griff, and I underscore the word might, be able to accrue enough wealth such that it would be comparable to Matt Chapman's new contract with the San Francisco Giants. I was corresponding with somebody in the game over the weekend and just trying to get their point of view on the offseason that has been for Scott Boras.
Define the terms as we know it of Matt Chapman's contract before you get into this discussion.
Okay, so three with the San Francisco Giants, 3 years, $54 million with opt-outs after each season. $20 million for this year, $18 million next year if he opts in, and $16 million in the third year if he opts into that. San Francisco Giants. So we were talking last week about Cody Bellinger, 3 years, $80 million with the Cubs. These are Scott Boras clients. Opt-outs after both year 1 and year 2 for Bellinger. MLB Trade Rumors, highly regarded, highly respected site, a go-to for all of us, had Bellinger projected at a 12-year, $264 million contract in free agency when the offseason began. Had Matt Chapman projected for a 6-year, $150 million deal. And Griff, Matt Chapman, and turning down the qualifying offer is not something I'm here to criticize. You do that. You obviously do that. But for the point we're making here, Matt Chapman's $20 million salary this year with the San Francisco Giants is $325,000 less than the $20.325 qualifying offer that the Blue Jays tabled him before free agency. This is, I would almost say it's unbelievable.
And I honestly believe that if Ross Atkins and the Blue Jays had been aware of what Chapman eventually would sign for, that they would not have signed Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, because with the contract, 2 years, $15 million that they spent on IKF, they really don't have room under the luxury tax thresholds. They're already over the first one. 237 million was the first one. They're at 248. 257 is the next one. Without IKF and with Chapman, they would have still been in that middle range between the first and second level. But with Kiner-Falefa and adding Matt Chapman would have put them over the second. And I think maybe that's an unknown factor that came into play in terms of, we're all saying, why on earth would they not sign Matt Chapman and make this team 2 wins better when you're struggling to make the postseason and this guy can help? But maybe that has something to do with it. But let's go back to, I'm curious about your conversation with this unknown person.
Yeah, this unknown person in the game. We were just talking, and couple of things regarding Scott Boras. Number one, the feeling is that, and I don't think that either comment here is splitting the atom. But number one, he overvalued his clients, which I suppose is an agent's job.
And it's worked
for him in the past. It's worked for him in the past. And number two, and this is the key, is he undervalued or misread or misunderstood the uncertainty out there. And that gets tied back to the fact that half the teams are not entirely clear on what their revenue numbers are going to be for the 2024 season, because regional sports networks owned by Diamond have gone belly up. Major League Baseball has taken over the production of some teams' TV broadcasts. The Arizona Diamondbacks come to mind. San Diego Padres, actually, their issues began in the middle of last season. So there's a lot of uncertainty.
Twins, you mentioned the Twins, because the Twins are in the middle of a controversy where their GM said that we're not going to sign any one player for $30 million. And Scott Boras is leading the charge to have him sanctioned and the Twins fined for putting out there publicly, which is quite obvious to the casual observer or to someone paying close attention, is that they are not going to pay $30 million, but it's in the basic agreement where GMs aren't allowed to discuss that sort of thing. And so the Twins are in that group. Definitely.
Well, Pollad's actually an owner, isn't he? Is it like he's the son of like the Pollad family? Yeah. He's an executive, right? So because Falvey's their baseball guy, I think, but that means as much or more coming from somebody in the ownership group.
But to your point, Major League Baseball has so many different, among the 30 teams, have so many different financial situations, unlike your NFL, which you love, where the pool, the broadcast pool, because the games are so well scheduled, the broadcast pool is split 32 ways, and you start out the year with enough money to pay for any player you want. But baseball is a different, so we're going back to your conversation.
Yeah, no, so I mean, but that was essentially it, was that overvalued his own players, and the second part being more important, which was misread or misunderstood the uncertainty out there tied to RSNs and the struggle that they're having. And you see teams shedding salary. I mean, the San Diego Padres kind of suffered a double whammy, and their RSN went belly up, and then very sadly their owner passed away. Yeah, Walter O'Malley's grandson, the legendary Dodgers owner who moved the Dodgers from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, Peter Seidler, on the maternal side of the O'Malley family, you know, he passed away from cancer in his early 60s before the new year. So there's a lot going on with some of these teams that had a proclivity to spend recently, Griff. And I think that, you know, I mean, Boras is always going to paint this sweetly to his players and try to save face. And I mean, the fellow I was talking to and I both agreed, I mean, Scott Boras is never going to starve, right? But it is his job, and it is his ego, and it is his reputation to maximize these players' values. And I think what he says to Cody Bellinger or what he says to Matt Chapman, whether it's true or not, Rich, because Matt Chapman's going to be 32 next year, and he's not going to a hitter's ballpark. Oracle, I think it's called now, used to be Pac Bell, AT&T. That Giants ballpark is gorgeous. You got to get there if you can and see a ball game, but it is not a hitter's haven. I think especially at night.
It inherited the Oracle name.
I think it inherited from the Warriors across the way. But like, so if he has another offensive year, which might in some ways be predictable to the one that he had with the Blue Jays last year, he's going into free agency at age 32. Who the hell's giving him 6 and 120 or 6 and 150 next year. These opt-outs give the Bellingers and the Chapmans of the world. Bellinger is younger. He won't even be 30 by next year's free agency. But it gives these guys the opportunity to go and pursue that long-term contract again. But that doesn't mean it's going to be there. And I would add this. Next year, Juan Soto is a free agent. And I don't care if you are a mid to small market team. If you have money to spend, it doesn't mean he's going to sign with you. But if I'm the Pittsburgh Pirates and I'm the Kansas City Royals, I might be his 22nd or 23rd choice on a list of 22 or 23 teams that he could sign with. But that's the guy I want, because Soto broke in as a teenager. So he's hitting free agency at 25, 26, the age that most players are breaking into the big leagues at. And he's on base 42% of the time. So, I just think a lot of teams might also, Griff, you've got uncertainty with RSNs, and you've also got this projectable player, whether it's likely or not that you land him, you at least want to keep enough in the coffers to take that run. Why not?
The Scott Boras modus operandi over the years, and it's worked for him, is that he usually has 2, 3, 4 of the top free agents at the end of a season, and he watches the market develop. He keeps his players back. He waits until the market has been established, and then he clears that bar. So he waits for the bar to be set, and then he clears it with his clients. And that has all changed because of the reduced revenues that teams had from their regional sports networks going belly up. And that's also changed, I think, even in philosophy, because I think that teams now are more interested in extending their own players. And Scott Boras's strategy has always been, this is your free agent year. We're not signing with your current team. We're going to test the market because that's where you get all your money, which is not the case this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if Scott Boras's strategy changes, because he's a smart man. He's done great things for his clients through the years. But this year has been a disaster. You look at the Phillies just signing Zach Wheeler for an average of $42 million for 3 seasons. That's their own player. Meanwhile, Boras' clients, Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery, are still got their cup out looking for a handout. And they're going to land on their feet. They're probably going to take the similar deal that the other Boras clients have taken, short-term, 3 years, opt-outs after year 1 and year 2. And your theory is what? He's doing that so that next season, if teams get back on their feet revenue-wise, he can go at it again. That's what you were suggesting.
Well, I would think with a guy like Cody Bellinger, you'll say to him, go hit 30 more home runs at Wrigley Field, put up an 850 OPS, a 130 OPS plus. You play a plus center field, you play a plus first base. You're from a positional perspective with a glove on your right hand. He throws left-handed, so he can't play middle infield or third base or catch, but he is a flexible positional player for someone who throws left-handed, and he plays the outfield and first base at plus levels. Go do all of that, and we'll see where things are next year. And maybe having a home run hitter, both literally and figuratively, like Juan Soto, out there on the market to sort of reset a bar. We get you in underneath that, and you're doing it for 6 or 7 years with whoever you sign with for 190 or 200 million bucks. I mean, in a perfect world, Griff, I would imagine that that's got to be the selling point, because there's no other way to save face in this offseason. We're at a point here now. You and I are talking midday on March the 4th. It's a Monday in early March. I could sit here quite literally and say to you, with NFL free agency 9 days away and the negotiating window 7 days away, 1 week away, who's going to sign first? Kirk Cousins or Blake Snell? And I'll get back to what I've been harping on, because I love to play my hits. It's bad for the game. It's bad for the game. Business is not being conducted. And if you are an insider and you report on the hot stove, I get it. You're always going to be locked in. Doesn't matter the time of year. This is fascinating stuff. It's important stuff. It's big business. It can change the shape of teams. I get all of that. I'm more removed now than I used to. I was never an insider, but I'm more removed now than I was when I was reporting on the Blue Jays. And I can tell you, as somebody with a degree of removal from how it used to be for me, this is not entertaining. This is bad for the sport. It doesn't look good. Blake Snell should be in somebody's camp. Jordan Montgomery should be in somebody's camp. Matt Chapman should have been in Giants camp the day position players reported. Same for Bellinger with the Cubs. It's not a good look. They got to figure this thing out. And maybe it's a one-season blip because of all the confluence of events we've discussed, but it's not good. It's not good.
We have spoken about this in several exit philosophies in a row about how fan bases, there's 30 major league teams, fan bases in at least 25 of them are not happy about this winter. And the winter is when you're selling goodwill, you're selling tickets. The Blue Jays are trying to sell their high price memberships at the new clubs. So if you've got 3/4 of your teams not happy, their fan base is not happy, then something is wrong with the way you're conducting your offseason. And to the earlier point, Matt Chapman, it's clear that the strategy with Matt Chapman is that you will play one season with the Giants and then opt again for free agency, because why else would you structure it 20, 18, 16, unless you weren't planning on being there for the 18 and 16? Because if you have a good year, you're taking a $2 million hit in your salary for 2025, that makes no sense. So they are doing the Giants a favor by having the AAV, the average annual value, be $18 million while they're paying him $20 million. And then he can opt out and they start it from scratch.
Yeah. And
as we believe Scott Boras' strategy is, and we may see a similar deal for Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery.
And if he fouls a ball off his shin and breaks a bone, Griff, and he's out for 2 months and the numbers just aren't there, he can opt in and try it all again after the 2025 season, having made $18 million next year, right? I mean,
correct. And that's the argument or the logic that Scott Boras, in a failed offseason, in a huge fail for his personal offseason, he can use those arguments with his clients and say, hey, we'll go get him next year because people will be back on their feet with their TV and streaming. They'll know where the revenue is coming from. They'll see that they should have signed you and they didn't. And now we'll give them another opportunity with their pockets full of money to spend.
Which, and I don't know if we've ever talked about it here on Exit Philosophy, but I certainly used to discuss it on the radio shows that I used to host, Griff. And, you know, you can get really good opinions on this talking to people around the game. And I can't remember how much Mark Shapiro talked about this, if at all, on the record, but he certainly had some ideas about it, just shooting the breeze behind the scenes. I mean, players are getting squeezed on both ends here. And, you know, the word collusion comes out and this and that. You know what? It is not collusion to me if 30 different teams all think the same way about giving $200 million to a guy who's 32 at the start of the contract. Right? I mean, teams don't care about AAV so much anymore. And some teams, I mean, the Blue Jays are one of them. They'll spend into the luxury tax and reset later. They're fine with it. Like Max Scherzer's 39, 40 years old. He goes to the New York Mets for like $42 million a year for 2 years. So make it a massive payday, but on a short-term scale.
But that guy, the Mets owner, was having a brain fart at the time because, like, it's not working out. And all of a sudden, he's not rebuilding; he's resetting. That's what they're saying. Right. In New York.
Yeah. Yeah. But so my point is, though, is that these guys, like Pujols taught people a lesson with the Angels. Prince Fielder with Detroit, and they couldn't offload him to Texas fast enough. And it was a neck injury that curtailed and wrecked his career sooner than it should have ended, unfortunately. But like, people learn lessons off of that. And I'm sure there are other examples that are skipping my mind at this point. But like, it's not collusion to have hesitation about giving an 8 to 10 year contract to a player who's already on the wrong side of 30. It's not collusion. The data shows it's not a good idea. The results show it's not a good idea. The problem is that unlike hockey, basketball, and football, where, you know, you're breaking in at a younger age, you've got to accrue 6 years of major league service time to attain free agency. And a lot of these guys don't break in until 23, 24, 25. And that's assuming they stay at the big league level to accrue consistent time. They're 30, 31 years old before they're hitting free agency, and teams are saying, you're old.
And they're
we're not giving you 7 years.
They're battling early career roster manipulation by 30 teams who figured out that if we keep them in the minors until mid-May, then we get the 7th year. So now that makes them even a year older.
I used to call it rosterbation. You get guys up one day, guys go down the next, they're back 10 days later. That, like, let's just roster bait.
Because somebody's adding those numbers up and finding the exact sweet spot of not being a Super 2 arbitration guy or coming up less than 172 days, which accumulated is 1 year of major league service. So it's amazing the guys that you look at, and they're between 160 and 171 days of service. And you know, those are the guys that have been manipulated. Their roster time has been manipulated, and the GM will go, well, we sent him down because he needed at bats and he wasn't getting them here. Bullshit. You sent him down because you figured out that he could get under 172 days and you would have him an extra year, which leads me to what we were talking about with Scott Boras. I believe that Scott Boras will change his strategy now because he gets all these free agents who are becoming his clients and then waiting until after their 6 years are up, and now they're 30, 31, like Chapman, or, you know, they've done. Blake Snell has won 2 sides, but he walks too many guys. I think he's going to go the other way, and instead of waiting for the bar to be set and then going over that bar with his clients, which was a disaster this year, and it was remained his strategy this year, and I think that will be for the last time. He's going to take his young clients who are in their 4th year, guys like in their 5th year, like Vlad and Bo, who are not his clients, but guys similar to that, and he's going to jump in there and try and get those mega deals, mega extensions, while these players are in their mid to late 20s, and include those years in his mega deal for 8-10 years. I think you're going to see that strategy with Scott Boras, who's the greatest agent who's ever been in baseball.
And why wouldn't you do that? I mean, and as you said, Vlad and Bo are not Boras clients, but they are going to hit free agency at advantageous times based on their ages when it happens. You know, Vlad broke in as a teenager. Bo was very young. Like, those are long-term contract guys because their age suggests they're entering their prime and won't come out of their prime until the back end of the deal. And they won't fall off a cliff out of their prime because they're not going to be 39 when it's over. And if it is, it's because it's a 12-year contract and you just accept that anyway. And it's probably 2 general managers down the road problem.
And right? It's becoming clear that teams would rather spend the mega bucks like Zach Wheeler just got with the Phillies, averaging $42 million a year for 3 seasons. Teams would rather spend the mega bucks on players who have been with them, and they are paying them, they are rewarding them for years where they had them under team control. Now they're getting even. But if you get a Blake Snell or you get a Jordan Montgomery, you're paying them mega bucks for things they've done with another team, and you don't even know how they're gonna perform this year and through 2028 or 29. If you're gonna lock them up, you don't know what you're gonna get, but you can always justify paying someone who's come up through your own system, rewarded you with outstanding effort and deserving of a big salary. Now you're paying them that big salary. And I think the game is headed in that direction. And it's already been there. I mean, you look at Bobby Witt Jr., you look at, there's a ton of guys that are organization players who are being rewarded before they even sniff free agency because teams and fans value that player. And you're not rewarding them for something they did for another team.
We swore an oath, not a blood oath, but we swore an oath, Griff, that we were not going to overreact to anything early on in spring training, right? In terms of player performance and what have you. And it would have been nice to sit here and say whatever it is we wanted to say about Alek Manoah's performance the other day. The velocity was up, but seems like the batter's box was more of a bullseye than it was the spot where the batter was standing. He hit three players. That all kind of goes out the window now because Manoah's come up with some shoulder soreness. Kevin Gausman has come up with some shoulder soreness. Now, both players have been imaged, MRIs, and there is no structural damage, we're told, with either of them. Manoah's a bit of a different story, and I'm not red flagging this and blasting the sirens here and freaking everybody out. But I mean, look at Gausman's last 3 seasons. 185 innings pitched last year, 174 and 2/3 2 years ago, his first year with the Jays, and prior to that, 192 innings for the Giants in 2021. And in the COVID-shortened year, he made 10 starts, right? And that was what, a 60-some game season? Remind me. I mean, so he made every start. Yeah. This is a guy, and you go way back to his Baltimore days, 179 and 2/3 innings in 16, 186 and 2/3 in 17. His 2018 season split between the Orioles and the Braves, 183 and 2/3 innings. This guy has thrown more than 1,500 innings in his career. Now, this might just be a blip, Griff. He might be back on a Grapefruit League mound in a week, and he might make 32, 33 starts for the Jays this season, and this conversation never needed to happen. But pain is a bit of a flag for me right now. It's not a big one, but it's something.
Yeah, we've talked about the amazing good health that the Blue Jays' excellent pitching staff, especially the rotation, had in 2023. And then you look at Manoah and you look at Gausman in particular, because he's likely to be the opening day starter at the Trop on the 28th of March. So he's got some time, but he hasn't been on the mound yet. He hasn't pitched in a game yet. And Manoah, the 5th starter doesn't have to pitch until game 11 of the season, because there's off days that allow a 5-man rotation to get regular rest. And so you're talking about, I think it's April the 9th. So you're talking well into the schedule, which gives a guy with a sore shoulder some extra time. You could leave him at the complex because they're opening in Tampa. So you could leave him at the complex to throw and maybe get a game in there, and carry an extra reliever. But sort of brings the importance of Bowden Francis and maybe Yariel Rodriguez, who hasn't been in a game either, the Cuban right-hander, as a 6th starter. I mean, you may need him as a 5th starter earlier on. And Barrios, I don't think anyone has any concern about his health, because he has never missed a start in going into his 8th season. Never missed a start, never been hurt, never not taken the ball when it was given to him. And so, that's what you build around. Chris Bassett, we're not sure. He's had some health issues over time. And you say Kikuchi looks like he's he's been healthy for the time that he's been with the Blue Jays. So the health that they had in 2023 is not going to repeat itself in 2024. Right. And we're looking at two bum shoulders, Manoah and Gausman. We're looking at all sorts of pitchers missing time at this point.
Tiedemann's got the leg thing.
Tiedemann is back and looked good. Just throwing to live hitters. But yeah, at this point, it's no use worrying about Gausman or Manoah, because Manoah, like we said, has that extra time to get ready. But you know that this is just a preview of what's going to happen during the season. So they need to go 6, 7, 8 starting pitchers deep. And
yeah, and you mentioned Francis and Yariel Rodriguez and
Tiedemann.
I mean
Tiedemann. He might be ready.
Tiedemann's a guy that's probably going to be up at points this year, Griff. Maybe not consistently, but he'll be up.
Well, he won't be like a guy that you rely on in the postseason, because he'll probably have reached a pitch limit. He hadn't thrown very many pitches as a pro. And if you need him to get to the postseason, he might be sent to the bullpen. Like, remember David Price in his rookie season with Tampa Bay went to the bullpen and he was outstanding in that role. So they have, and that's the thing about spring training and these exhibition games. We're seeing nothing but their minor league depth. They got guys throwing at the complex rather than going on the road. And to me, if I was a fan going to spring training, if I spent 2 weeks of my vacation going to see the Blue Jays and I end up seeing all the guys that are out there that were at low A, double A, triple A, and I don't see any of my regulars. They're 0-4 on the road because they play nothing but scrubs on the road. The only regulars that go on road trips are one catcher, either Kirk or Jansen.
Right.
And the rest of them are like, Elvis Martinez is going to lead the league in at bats by the end of this.
They got a pretty good lineup today, and we're talking on March the 4th, but they're in Dunedin against the Phillies. So, I mean, maybe we can do the tourist's guide to Toronto Blue Jays spring training, Griff, which is, the stadium's much better than it ever was with the renovations that have taken place. So going to Dunedin, you got to go for the experience of it, and you're likely to see a better Blue Jays lineup, right? The starters tend to stay home.
Definitely.
You're better. You will see better stadiums than TD Ballpark, and they're not that far away necessarily. You got to go to, I think it's called Baycare Ballpark now. It was Bright House Field when I was covering the Jays. The Phillies spot in Clearwater, that's 10 minutes away. Chances are you're...
Yeah, if you're down there, you got to go to that ballpark because it's the best. And
you're staying in Clearwater anyway. Right. You're probably not staying in Dunedin, right?
And the Steinbrenner Field in Tampa is nice, but for me, it's too corporate. It's too Yankee. And
it is mechanical.
Yeah,
I will say that. I enjoy being the NFL nerd that I am. I enjoy parking on the grass across the street outside of Raymond James Stadium, the home of the Buccaneers, and walking across to Steinbrenner Field, because that's all in that same area. The Pittsburgh ballpark down in Bradenton.
They've renovated that. It's pretty good.
Like renovated it in the last few years?
Yeah.
Funny thing, Griff, we were talking about this last week. You and I sharing the top of a garbage can.
Oh, yeah.
At what was McKechnie Field in Bradenton.
The press box.
Guess what came up as a Facebook memory from 9 years ago? Today, March the 4th, 2015.
Our favorite.
Somebody, whether it was you or John Lott, there I am, laptop open, standing up, typing, top of a garbage can in Bradenton. Yeah, so it must have been that day, 9 years ago today. where our little joke came from. But like Sarasota is really nice. And I again, with the Blue Jays, you're not going to see 1 through 9 a major league starting caliber lineup if the Jays go down to Fort Myers and play the Boston Red Sox. But you got to go to Fenway South. To see the Jays or somebody else, you got to go to Fenway South. You got to just experience. It's a mini Fenway Park, right? It's got a mini monster in left field, the whole deal. Like, these are the experiences. So
you will see Daniel Vogelbach, and you will see Eduardo Escobar, and you will see Orelvis Martinez. We can guarantee that.
Well, and you might see Orelvis Martinez at the big league level at some point this year, if not next. For you would think Vogelbach, by the way, is it just me, or relatively speaking, has he cut a little?
Yeah, no, he
didn't look.
He didn't look. When he reported last season to the Pirates, there were stories. I went back and looked, and there were stories that he had lost 30 pounds.
Yeah, he looked like he didn't look like adorable Adrian Adonis at WrestleMania 3. Like he looked for an old reference.
But still, he does not have a spot on a 4-man bench with the lack of versatility and the Blue Jays committing pretty much to Justin Turner and getting their regulars off their feet every now and then as a DH. There's really no spot for a guy who might pop 15 to 20 homers for you over 162 games. You just don't have a spot for him.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is in the search for daily content, which you and I aren't necessarily after on this podcast, Griff, because we talk on average once a week. But as you're going through spring and you're covering spring training, you're talking to guys, you're writing their stories, you're talking to the manager, you're talking to coaches, getting a sense for who they see where, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Pete Walker probably lost years off his life having someone like me come to him every third day and be like, so this is how I'm seeing you set your starting rotation for the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season. Am I onto something here? We just kind of laugh and say, oh, it's that time of year again, right? But so that's what you're kind of after. I don't see a lot of available spots on this Blue Jays roster. I suppose there's a bench conversation or two that might be intriguing, because you just have a glut of guys, right? From the Escobars to the Espinals, to the Vogelbachs, to the Clement being out of options. There's a variety of,
even Isaiah Kiner-Falefa could be considered. To me,
or like a Biggio.
To me, right? The bench is going to cover second base and third base every day, plus be the bench. So to me, there's 6 bench players going to be on that team. 2 of them will be starting at second and third, and 4 of them will be on the bench, one of them being the catcher who's not playing. So like that, if you want to consider that is the deepest bench, it's got the most players, but right. I don't know if it's the most talented bench, but it certainly is the deepest in terms of numbers, because most teams have a clear starter at every position. And if you name Davis Schneider at second base, I say bullshit. If you say Kevin Biggio, I say, well, he's got a platoon because that's what he's best at, and he's going to play some right field when Springer isn't out there. And so he's a bench player. Third base, Turner is the DH. You can't count him as a third baseman. And if you've got you've got Santiago Espinal and Biggio and IKF, there's too many bench players and not enough starters, which brings me to you talked about catching up with guys and Pete Walker rolling his eyes because you're asking him the same questions. Well,
rolling his eyes in good fun.
Yeah,
like, oh, it's that time of year again. Yeah.
But there was an interview by Rob Longley with John Schneider in the Monday Sun. And he got him by himself, and he talked to him for 30 minutes behind home plate while watching BP. And he really said some interesting things about the game 2 with Jose Barrios, explained himself. And he said there were 3 groups. He's learning to live with it. It's his decision, even though he was advised that this was the way we were going to do it. I think the timing of when he took Barrios out was John Schneider's decision. And he did it prematurely. He could have waited another time through the batting order, through the Twins batting order, because Barrios was dealing. And so he said there was a group of players or several players who came to him and said, what the bleep is that all about? And I'm thinking that maybe Matt Chapman was one of those guys, because we saw Matt Chapman's result or dugout confrontation after they didn't pitch around Shohei Ohtani. We saw that confrontation. So we know Matt Chapman is confrontational. And the fact that Chapman was batting bottom third of the order in games 1 and 2 against the Twins, maybe his ego took a blow. He's a Californian with a chance to move back to train in Arizona and play in the Bay Area where he came up and grew up.
Back with Bob Melvin.
Yeah. I think more than anything, I mean, it might have been a mutual decision, but I think Matt Chapman had as much to do with not wanting to play for the Blue Jays as the Jays did in not wanting him back after signing IKF and realizing that another contract of $20 million would put them into the next range of luxury tax. So, but if you get a chance to read Rob Longley's interview, it was really eye-opening to me.
Yeah, I appreciated in that article that, Schneider obviously was willing to be that open with Rob, and Rob's one of those guys who's around all the time, right? I mean, there are just so few of those now who are able to work fully independently and have conversations like that. That one is going to sting until this organization, and that one being the Twins playoff series in general. Gosman not having it in game 1, pulling Barrios in game 2, Vladdy getting picked off a second base in a crucial situation in the middle of game 2, the offense disappearing 1 run in 2 games, blah, 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 until they course correct that, Griff. And John Schneider, I feel that John Schneider has worn that more than his fair share. I like the term you used, that he was advised. But, there's advising somebody that they're going to do something, and then there is advising somebody that they're going to do something, ... or else. And so, I mean, that's the results of that played out. The key now is to bounce back this year. And I understand that Fangraphs likes this team to win in the low 90s, and there's other objective data available online for anybody who wants to look it up that thinks this team is a low 90s win team. I have a lot of questions about this lineup, Griff. And we've discussed the unlikelihood, if that's a word, of this starting rotation staying as healthy as it did last year. I mean, heck, it can't get any healthier,
right?
It can only get less healthy. And, we sit here and we say, well, they got Bo, they got Vlad, they got this, they got that. Yeah, Turner, Springer. Springer's getting older. Turner is old by baseball standards. Like, we sit here and we say, well, this is their lineup. I got questions about this lineup as is. Take Justin Turner out of the mix for a month. Take George Springer out of the mix for a month. Both of those are realistic possibilities. Turner, given his age, Springer, given his history in Toronto, he was more healthy last year than he had been in his first 2 years with the Jays, but he's not getting any younger. Bo Bichette has talked about some of the different lower body training he did in the offseason to try to keep those quads and those knees healthier over a 162 game grind, but Bo has missed time. Like this lineup is walking a very thin line. And if it's missing a couple of its upper half key bats at the same time for any significant period of time, and what significant period of time, Scott? I'd say 2 weeks or more. It's going to be tough. That convince me otherwise.
Well,
It's going to be tough.
I think one thing that this Blue Jays performance in the Grapefruit League season this year, I think heading into Monday, they were 2-6 or 2-7. And like I said, they've lost all 4 road games, and they're playing at home today on Monday as we record. I think what that has showed is the weakness of their farm system, since we've agreed that they're not playing their regulars more than 2 at bats and only at home games. Then the rest of the Grapefruit League schedule is being carried by their top minor leaguers, their AAA, AA guys, occasional arms that they bring up from Class A or who had a little bit of AA. And the way that they are unable to compete, to me, means that, to your point, if someone gets injured for 2 weeks, it's not like last year in August, from August 25th to September 10th, when there were a couple of injuries, Chapman, Jansen, and they filled in against 5 teams with losing records. It was the perfect time of the schedule to fill in for injuries with guys from Buffalo. And those 5 Buffalo guys cemented their reputations as maybe being the bench players for 2024. But the bottom line is they were playing bad teams, and they all had great stretches of 15 games, and the Jays went 10-5. But you're seeing this spring that the group of players that are playing most of the Grapefruit League games do not compete at that level against other teams, AAA and AA players late in games. And that's why they're 2-6, 2-7, whatever it is, and haven't won a road game. Don't blame the bus driver.
Who is the bus driver? Do they have a regular guy who drives
Oh, they
buses?
got a regular guy.
Yeah.
Oh, they got a regular guy. Yeah.
I don't think I ever met regular guy who drives bus.
Yeah, they got 2 buses, and the lead driver is always there. I think Mike Shaw was the best tipper in the Grapefruit League in terms of when he was traveling secretary. Now he's with the Braves. He had the biggest handshake with a hidden 100 in there, and bus drivers were crawling over each other to drive the Blue Jays.
Oh yeah. By the way, speaking of the Braves, I had to do a double take. It's the other thing with our age, right? Because the white starts to come in on the beard and all that. But
really,
Alex, not that you'd know. Alex Anthopoulos was sitting off just to the side there behind home plate, but toward the Braves third base dugout in Dunedin. I think it was Sunday. Was it? Whatever day the Braves were in, probably Saturday, 2 days ago. Because we're talking on Monday, March.
Sunday was the Manoa aborted game in Fort Myers.
That's right.
With
yes, that's right.
4-hour bus ride.
Yeah,
which he had a source.
Yeah. Oh, those bumpy those potholes down I-75, they just upset the shoulders. The Griff conspiracy coming out.
So the Anthopoulos, you saw.
Yeah, but no, I had to do like 2 or 3 takes. Is that Alex? It is Alex. So, but I always kind of snicker to myself because it's almost like he knows sometimes how to get on camera.
Oh,
it's been almost a decade, but it's almost just like this thing where I don't think he's doing it intentionally sometimes, but sometimes poof, he's just there. And I'm not spending any time on Twitter these days, so I have no idea if that ignites any conversation. Goodness, I hope not now, because it's been so long. But that Braves team had a pretty good offseason, and it'll be fascinating to see how that whole thing in the National League shakes down. The Dodgers are going to be there. The Braves, obviously, the Phillies. Philadelphia is a weird team, right? Because they're kind of clunkily built. It's like they stuck a bunch of designated hitters all over the field, and yet they go out and win games and all that. But it'll be fascinating to see how it all shakes down.
Before we wrap this up, Scotty, I got one question. I made a note here, but this is now year 9. We're going into year 9 of the Ross Atkins GM regime.
Correct.
So they won 89 games last season, and we have questions about the 2024 and how that's going to go. His first year, Ross Atkins' first year in 2016, he inherited an Alex Anthopoulos team. They won 89 games, same as this year. And they dropped the next year to 76 wins. Now, Fangraphs says that that's not possible, but they're saying like 90 something. But in that off season between 2016 and 2017, the first off season for Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, they made zero trades. There was a bunch of granted free agencies and a bunch of free agent signings. They lost Edwin, they lost Jose Bautista, then re-signed him. Do you think it's possible? I mean, is that a worst case scenario that they repeat history and go from 89 wins to 76 wins? Do you think that's possible?
I'll tell you this. If that happens, Griff, see ya. All of you out. Gone.
I mean, you already covered what happens if a position player gets hurt, and we've already covered that there's a couple of shoulder issues, and they're not serious by any means. But
no, but if they pancake this year, clean house. And as I said last year, I have no faith in the person who will have to find their replacements. No faith. But look, I mean, you came in selling player development. Certainly the facilities are top notch, but they've got a bottom third farm system that, as you alluded to earlier, isn't providing enough fruit. They need to land a few guys there. They need Davis Schneider to take a step. They need an Orelvis Martinez or somebody like him to come up and be impactful, perhaps in limited time, but they need guys to take steps. If one or two injuries is enough or are enough to absolutely wreck a season, then it is a reflection of a lack of depth. And you came in talking about pipeline, talking about wanting to be the Dodgers, talking about, your astuteness with player development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no going back now, especially because everybody's going to look at the Orioles and say, dude, you've been lapped. Right. So
granted, they have been willing to trade prospects for established major leaguers, like they did with Jose Barrios, trading their top position player and their top right-handed pitcher, or one of their top right-handed pitchers at the time. So they've been willing to do that, which could account for this middle of the pack or bottom of the pack status of the farm system. But the fact that they're in the top 6 to 8 in terms of team payroll, if at the major league level, if they do not come close to making a wild card, if they drop from 89 wins to around just above 500 or at 500, then, I mean, all bets are off in terms of the future of this organization, especially with all those seats to sell. And we know how finicky Blue Jays fans, especially the high rollers, are in terms of, that they were able to fill those outfield because that's a bunch of drunks like me,
But I was just going to say, Griff, I remember when the skyboxes, when Skydome opened in 1989, companies, individuals, I guess, but typically companies, they signed 10-year deals. Yeah. And Skydome hit a real tough go in the late 90s when those deals came up and didn't get renewed. And then there were a lot of empty skyboxes for Blue Jays games. Things had taken a downturn. And maybe we should know this, but I don't know off the top of my head what the commitments are for some of those plus seats. And if there are multi-year commitments made by some of the area's wealthy, knowing that those seats are locked in for a few years, that might spur the owner to go, renewals for a 76-win team aren't likely, so we got to get people in here who can build this thing out so that when it comes time for people to renew, we're contending again. So I think there is pressure on these guys this season.
Yeah. Well, we can leave it at that, but I definitely think even the level 300 and 400 suites that you alluded to that had 10-year commitments, if those all go downstairs to the below ground private social clubs, who's going to be renting those suites? And so it's, there is a lot of pressure on Ross Atkins and John Schneider and this ball club to be competitive and to fill that place in August and September, and we'll see how that turns out.
Now, you and I could go into one of those suites and just squat, Griff. We'll do our broadcasts from there. We'll squat. You can't evict us. We're just sitting here. Yeah, not causing anybody any trouble.
Bring me another $35 pizza, please.
There you go. All right, this was a fun one. And remember, griffsthepitch.com. That's where you can get Griff's entire catalog of work, multiple weekly columns. And, of course, he's ramping up the writing again now that we are back in season. Exclusive conversations with some of the game's greats, Blue Jays and Expos from back in the day alike. And youtube.com/Exit Philosophy is where you can watch this podcast. And it's where Griff and I will go live for some select post games over the course of the season. youtube.com/Exit Philosophy. Please subscribe. Please like, and please give us a thumbs up, a nice rating wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next Monday, barring something unforeseen in between. And by that point, Griff, we'll be inside 3 weeks until opening day.
Yeah, we got to at some point get into power ranking of the American League. Maybe we save that for 2 weeks from now, but that'll be a fun show. Anyway, thanks, Scotty.
Let's get Snell and Montgomery signed.
Yeah. Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll talk to you next week.